Hey, welcome to the Hash. I'm Zack Seward. We are going to talk about some crypto news today. Let's start this thing off. Naomi, I believe you are opening the show. Can you do that for me, please?
I can do that. I think I can do
Thank
that,
you
Zack.
so much. I appreciate you
You're
so much. Thank you.
welcome. We are talking about surveillance on the internet, on mobile devices, and a huge leak that has just been, catching all of the media outlets over the past couple of days. It's just been getting bigger and bigger. So apparently, there's this company. It's from Israel. It's called NSO Group. They make spyware that's called Pegasus. They sell it to regimes around the world. And the intent of this surveillance software is to catch terrorists and criminals and catch the bad guys, essentially. A huge leak has shown that a lot of the people that were contracted have actually been using this spyware to target activists, to target journalists, to target opposition politicians. And so it's just like this big scandal that's coming out. I think the big story out of this is that it has been used to target these dissidents. It's also, they started to reveal names of people who were targeted. They're saying that this is linked to the death of Khashoggi, so Washington Post journalist who was killed. So lots of stuff to dive into here. There's a big question about whether or not the governments who use this are spending more money buying spyware for targeting political opponents or targeting criminals. And it just goes to show you, the double-edged sort of surveillance, because we talk about this on the show all the time. We talk about, when the government has the power to target people, do they just go after the bad guys or are all of us at risk? And it's sort of the point of privacy advocates to say, actually, it becomes this, descending slope, and lots of people, anyone who's speaking truth to power, can be a target. So it's a really interesting story that's come out. I'm going to throw this straight to Ben to get your thoughts on all of this. What's your first reaction here?
Yeah, so first off, this was it involved a lot of different organizations working on this. So Amnesty International and Forbidden Stories, a Paris-based, nonprofit journalism outlet, they sort of compiled a lot of this information and then shared it with outlets like the Washington Post for further vetting and analysis, and also brought in Citizen Lab, which is a Toronto-based kind of security research firm, nonprofit as well at a university, who's been following NSO Group since, I believe, about 2016, if not before. NSO Group is not a new player on this scene. They've been around for years and years and years, and they're also not the only ones doing this, but they have really had a kind of pervasive effect and, sell really advanced spyware to a variety of entities. And so, I just kind of want to lay out what Pegasus can do. It can track targets' location. It can read their text, emails, social media messages, siphon photos and videos, and turn on the device's camera and microphone. And it can do all of this without some of the more traditional security measures that we talk about for your everyday user, right? Like, we talk about malicious links, we talk about scams, we talk about these sorts of things. Pegasus can be kind of injected into your phone using an SMS. And that's essentially where you don't even have to click on a link or do anything, but it's an SMS that's sent to you. You're not really alerted about it. And it starts trying to break down, your phone's security measures in a variety of different ways. And so it just really shows how pervasive this can be. Now, to be fair, this is, relatively, it's targeted at a small number of individuals. This isn't sort of like a mass effect thing like the security your mom needs. She's probably not going to be targeted by Pegasus spyware. That being said, it's a relatively small slice of the population that has an outsized influence and kind of, doing a lot of work around accountability, around corruption, around these other sorts of things. A French human rights lawyer was confirmed that he was hadn't been injected with, his phone had been injected with this software. And there's just so many kind of trails that go on here. But, NSO Group employees have also, in the past, one of them abused this technology to target a love interest in a variety of different ways. And they've just, had a long line of sort of just, not malicious, but kind of nefarious activities, unfortunately. And so, Jen, I want to pass this over to you to get your initial reactions.
Yeah, well, Ben, both you and Naomi spoke to the fact that this software is targeting a small group of people, but it's also targeting people connected to people who are sharing the truth and who are journalists and political activists. And so the network effect is still there, right? You cannot be involved in any of these circles, and maybe you're married to a journalist, or maybe you have a friend who you speak to often who's a political activist, and you yourself can be hacked. So I think this story for me really kind of summed up nicely the narrative we've been speaking around on the show about cybersecurity. and really solidified the message that we say every single time one of these stories comes up, is that the narrative in the mainstream media is that these softwares are being used to target criminals, and now we see that they're targeting, everyday civilians. And I don't know, it's very scary. I don't know what to do. If this can be put on your phone with just an SMS, what do we do? I was thinking about Naomi's privacy kit, and I was like, I don't know what to do. What do we do? Is there anything we can do?
So I just want to push back slightly on that, Jen, in the sense that like NSO Group has been really critically scrutinized by mainstream media, and particularly like private spyware firms like this have gotten a lot of exposure and like critical looks. So I don't think the mainstream media covers this as favorably as some people might think they do. And I mean, I want to also note, like in addition here, and then Naomi, I want you to dive into the Amnesty International toolkit that can help people detect if their phones have been, kind of attacked in this way. But also, NSO Group was running part of their infrastructure on AWS, which is Amazon Web Services, which is one of the largest cloud internet providers out there. Amazon has since shut down that infrastructure for them, but it shows the ways that these larger companies and sort of monolithic companies in a variety of ways, you get piggybacked on because NSO Group can kind of hide some of their infrastructure and inner workings of their company by running it through services like AWS. So just another side note, but Naomi, I want to toss it back to you.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's interesting because Pegasus deals with really targeted attacks. They're using 0 days, which basically means some sort of vulnerability in a device that has not yet been used in the wild, so it's unknown, and so they're exploiting that. Once it's used, it means 0 days since it's been used in the wild, so there's been 0 times that it's been out there. So the idea is using these things that people don't know how to protect against. So it's really, really targeted. And when we say targeted, because again, I want to go back to your point, Jen, about it going people thinking that this stuff is being used to target criminals and all of that, because we do hear that rhetoric all the time. We hear it from our own government in the United States. We hear them saying, we're targeting criminals. This stuff isn't going to be used for everyday citizens, but it is, and it's being used for the people who are objecting to people in power. So freelance Mexican reporter Cecilio Peñada Birdo, I probably pronounced that very incorrectly. He was found on the list. Apparently, he was of interest to a Mexican client in the weeks leading up to his murder. The killers were able to locate him at a car wash. So, I mean, this type of stuff is tracking down journalists, people who are trying to provide accountability. And if we don't safeguard that in society, all of democracy crumbles. All of civility crumbles. But yeah, there are tools that you can use. So there's a mobile verification toolkit, or MVT. As you mentioned, Ben, this has been put out by Amnesty. So Google that, or DuckDuckGo that, or whatever you want to use. And if you think that you may be at risk, and just safeguard yourself. But let's move on from here. Otherwise, we could probably talk about this all day, or I certainly can. So next story, who have we got next?
I've got you, Naomi. I'm going to take that one. Kind of staying in the realm of privacy concerns, but also going into a, different general area. 3 U.S. senators are calling on the U.S. national team to effectively boycott China's digital currency at the Winter Olympics in Beijing in 2022. So athletes should be forbidden from receiving or using digital yuans during the Beijing Olympics, according to Republicans Marsha Blackburn, Cynthia Loomis, and Roger Wicker. They said in a Monday letter that they sent to the U.S. Olympic Committee leadership, citing privacy concerns. So, Naomi, I'll toss this one right back to you as we are back on the subject of CBDCs, privacy, and all the other things that this entails.
Well, I mean, has anyone been reading George Selgin's rants against all of the research that's been going into CBDCs as a competitor for private stablecoins? Because it's super interesting. Highly recommend it if you have not. But I really do think that governments around the world, they are starting to see other governments' central bank digital currencies as potentially having the ability to cross borders, and they really want to keep their own sovereign walled garden intact. And so they are really trying to shut down the use of their citizens of entering other marketplaces, of having access to financial tools in other countries. And I think that this is another extension of this. I mean, I would encourage the people of China to boycott the central bank digital currency there as well. Like, it's clearly a spy tool. I think that most central bank digital currencies are, just because they're saying boycott, China. I think they're implying that if they had one, it would be safe, only use our products. Obviously, I don't agree with that. I think all of these things that are centrally controlled are just going to be used to track people and control the money supply even further, and control the movement of money, I should say, from everyday citizens. But Will, I'm going to throw to you. What are your thoughts on all this?
No, definitely just echoing what you're saying already. And we already have reports out of China that is what the digital yuan will be used for. And notably, I think there was a few months ago, we even talked about this on the show, that you can delete money from someone's address if they're using digital yuan because they didn't spend it in time. I also saw a tweet today, unfortunately don't remember the reference, about how you can't spend stimulus checks that are given to a digital yuan wallet for anything other than basic necessities. So they're just totally redirecting the cash flows for entire economy into the areas that they want, depending on the political motivations that the ruling party has. And in the case for the Communist Party of China, that's not necessarily in the realm of human rights, I'd say at this point. But Ben, I'm going to toss it back to you.
Yeah, I'm going to hit two things, Zach, and I'm going right to you. But one, I'm going to push back on this a little bit. I think it's really weird for sitting U.S. politicians to be trying to ban U.S. citizens from using a currency in another country, particularly while they're there. I think that's, a little bit more posturing than realistic in a lot of different ways. I also want to point out that, particularly Marsha Blackburn, who was one of kind of the co-sponsors of the Lawful Access to Encrypted Data Act, when that got introduced, along with Lindsey Graham and Tom Cotton, I think that we need to really look critically when these people are talking about privacy, because I think it's privacy for their interests in a lot of different ways and how it suits them best. So I think this should be read with a critical eye, particularly given some of the people involved in it. But Zach, I'll toss it up to you.
I just want to say that CBDC nationalism could get really ugly, right? I think this is the first taste we're getting of this, right? Do not use this. Do not use the currency of another sovereign state while you're in this area. It is against U.S. interests to do so. Interesting to see this rhetoric coming out of D.C. In the nascent stages of the CBDC experiment being rolled out by China. So expect more of this. We'll see how the private stablecoins intersect with this debate too, which will be interesting. But Will, what do you got?
Yeah, really quick before I give it to Naomi, just looking at the substance of the debate, I think is the most interesting thing. I saw one monetary economist talking about how he doesn't think that digitizing a currency that already exists is going to lead to the network effect that's needed to change the reserve status of a currency. So of course, the access of this debate is, will the dollar fall, stop being the reserve currency, and will another currency kind of rise because it's on a new digital rail that offers more compatibility, like smart contracts or cross-border payments or whatnot. And so I think the substance of the debate might be getting a little lost, and it's just being extremely politicized beforehand. And that might be the thing that leads to some really ugly outcomes. It's it might not be that there would be a change in the reserve status of any currency just because it goes onto a blockchain. But the fact that people are getting so up in arms about the possibility of it may be the thing that leads to a tipping point. Naomi, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Will, when people are talking about the reserve status and how widely it's accepted across the world, et cetera, because it's all to do with how much individual people are willing to accept it still. And that's still very prevalent. And I don't think that they're going to go to some other country's stablecoin, if it's run by another country. I can see them potentially go to a more decentralized option if they could see more freedom of money, et cetera, or get away from spying. But the other point is, I think about this, Cynthia Lummis has also talked a bit about this. I think she's, a far more positive crypto advocate than obviously Blackburn or any of those. But, she was saying, we can't let these athletes be used as a Trojan horse to increase the Chinese Communist Party's ability to spy on the United States. I think this really comes down to the fact that it's because it's digital. It's going to be on their phones. If they want to use this stuff, they have to have a mobile wallet. This really, when you start to put this digital stuff in your devices, you do have to be cognizant of what type of stuff it's tracking, what permissions it has, and all of that. So it's something to keep in mind as these things get rolled out across the world, whether or not you want to start using these, or whether you just want to use paper money when you're in those countries, or whether you want to use good old Zcash or Bitcoin or anything else that is way better than all these. But Zach, what have we got coming up after the break?
We're going to talk about stablecoin truth. USDC revealed what assets are backing the stablecoin that is the number 2 stablecoin in the crypto economy. Stick with us. We'll get to that after the break. It's The Hash.
welcome back to the Hash. So we're not moving away from stablecoins, but we're going to talk about private versus public now. So Circle, which is one of the issuers behind the USDC stablecoin via the Center curriculum, or I'm butchering this word right now. They work with Coinbase basically to put out this stablecoin, and they released an attestation of the assets backing that stablecoin and said that 61% of that stablecoin is backed by cash and cash equivalents, followed by 12% or 13% rather in Yankee certificates, 12% in US Treasuries, 9% in commercial paper, and then some other municipal and corporate bonds backing that as well. So interesting to see this attestation. Circle has always kind of had this play that they're more open about their reserves for their stablecoin versus their competitor Tether. Of course, Tether has started doing attestations, and at one time it was said that only 76% of Tether was backed by cash and cash equivalents. So this is a lower value than that bombshell report that I think came out in 2019, if memory is serving me right. So interesting to see that. Of course, I want to kind of get into the conversation about what is backing this stablecoin in terms of like how to facilitate a stablecoin. So it's not necessarily bad that only 60% of the stablecoin is backed by cash and cash equivalents, because you do need to be able to get in and out of the assets that are backing your stablecoin. But Zach, I want to get your thoughts on this topic first.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this is the level of transparency that was promised when Circle announced that it was going public through a SPAC deal. So it's nice to see that. Credit to them. We're trying to nail down if this is going to be the level of transparency going forward for all future attestations, but we're still getting trying to get a little more clarity on that from the Circle team as we speak. I think this is interesting. I think, sunlight is the best disinfectant, right? And there's a lot of questions swirling around the stablecoin sector at this point in time as more and more people start entering the space and start thinking through the implications of how crypto finance works. So more data on this is to be applauded. It's interesting to see this breakdown to this level of granularity, and we would hope that reports such as this continue to follow once Circle goes public later this year. So top line, that's my takeaway. I don't know if there's any other additional takes, but there's a lot of interesting stuff going on here just to look at the way these asset-backed stablecoins are collateralized. So I'll toss it back to you, Will. I know you have some nuance on this.
Yeah, so two quick thoughts. It comes after Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, I believe now. She issued some comments yesterday, I believe, talking about how there needs to be a regulatory framework for stablecoins issued immediately. And Jerome Powell, I think last week, said a similar statement. And they're worried about the effects that a stablecoin could have on the economy writ large. Like, is it an external threat to the market because these stablecoins are becoming so large? I think the stablecoin market is well over 100 billion at this point, which just shows demand to transact with cryptocurrencies and shows demand to use these exchanges really that are behind cryptocurrency itself. Another note is the commercial paper is interesting to see. It makes up a smaller percentage of the assets backing USDC than it does Tether. I think Tether's last report had in the 20 percentage points where commercial paper might even be a different value, but it's somewhere in that ballpark. And it just from a high level, commercial paper is kind of unsecuritized notes that are issued around 180 days or so. So if you need to raise funds for a firm, you can raise it on a short-term basis that way, and it's not secured like a typical security or a stock would be. And it makes sense for a stable coin because typically you have people cashing in and cashing out stablecoins relatively quickly. So I think that kind of gets lost in the nuance there. Is this, you can't just have cash and cash equivalents. You have to create kind of an asset bag here to make the stablecoin work. But Naomi, what are your thoughts on all this? I feel like there's going to be a lot of Tether truthers kind of spinning their wheels over USDC.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, I'm interested to see what commercial paper, what corporate bonds. We don't really have details of any of that. I wonder if those will be made public when their SPAC deal goes through later on this year. Does that information all get revealed? Zach, you would have a better idea of that. Will we actually find out which specific companies they've invested in?
Oh, no. Don't know. We're trying to get clarity on that. But yeah, I wouldn't be able to tell you with certainty at this point in time.
Yeah, but it is interesting. I mean, especially your point that you brought up before, Will, because it seems like we're just kind of normalizing this fractional reserving and not having cash backing these stablecoins when it was first suggested that Tether may not be backed. Like when they first, changed the terms on their website and were like, oh, it's being backed by cash and other debt instruments. And everyone's like, what? What are the other debt instruments? And this was crazy. And then the report came out and they're like, only 70-something%. This is crazy. And you're absolutely right. Now this report comes out and it's like, what, 61% backed by cash? And everyone's like, very interesting. I applaud the clarity that's coming out of them. Now we know exactly what this is.
Now we have data.
Now we have the data. It's like everyone's just content because they have the data. It doesn't matter what the data actually says. Like the data says that this is fractional reserve and there's 61% is actually cash backed. I mean, how liquid are all of the other things that they have? Like those companies that they've invested in, like this is worth diving into, especially when we're using voluntary currencies like these stable coins, which are privately issued. If you're going to be using these and thinking that they're secure and can safeguard your money, just make sure you're doing your research into it. Understand what is actually behind these. Free market is all about doing research, guys. So make sure you do it. But let's change track here. Zach, I'm going to throw this one to you. Tell us about NFTs.
I will catch that toss and I will do it. All right. The latest crypto unicorn is OpenSea. They just raised $100 million in a mega round led by Andreessen Horowitz. These guys are valued at $1.5 billion for selling NFTs. It's a marketplace. It's one of the more popular marketplaces on the internet. You can post your NFTs. You can buy your NFTs. You can sell your NFTs. You can do all sorts of stuff. And A16Z is making a repeat investment in this firm and seems to be betting in a big way that OpenSea is going to be the place where most people go to discover digital collectibles. Really interesting. I think we might see some of these more mega rounds come out towards the end of this cycle, but this is the first of the NFT unicorns. Super interesting to me. I'm going to toss this to Jen. Does OpenSea have a chance of being the top dog here, or what's your thinking on this?
Well, Will had his hand up first, so I'll go very quickly. I mean, I am so surprised every time we see these funding rounds. And is this the first unicorn? What was Top Shot valued? I feel like there was a $1 billion valuation we spoke about recently. Right. But anyways, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Yeah, I don't know. This is crazy. I don't know when it's gonna stop. The NFT ball keeps on rolling, no matter how what's the word I'm looking for? How sour we get on it sometimes on this show. I think NFTs are definitely around to stay, and I'm really interested to see what happens next once all of the mania starts to kind of subside. I'm really interested to see how we can use NFTs in our everyday life. But Will, first, before I pass it to Will, Zach, I need to applaud your shirt.
Oh, thank you.
It's just awesome.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. I know.
Yeah, for the viewers at home, I was wearing a striped shirt and it had the zebra effect, and this was the nearest available shirt. So shout out to Control Room.
The ultimate armor.
I'm wearing camo now. Watch out.
Very Eastern Pennsylvania. Thank you, crossbow authentic before this. No, two quick thoughts on this. One is it's just wild to see the difference between a bear market and a bull market. I remember reporting on OpenSea back during a bear market, and they were just tiny protocol. Nobody knew about them. Nobody had NFTs on them. No one cared about them. And they had some sort of hack or issue on their exchange. And I'm pretty sure no one clicked the story because it was OpenSea. No one cared about NFTs at the time, about 2 years ago. Now, $1.5 billion, major monies, and they got A16Z investing in them. So that's interesting to see where the money moves into these markets. Another thing that's interesting with these platforms is who comes onto the platform and places their NFTs. I think that Hashmask protocol or Hashmask NFT series that came out in January and February, I think they were only available on OpenSea for quite a while. And that kind of shows you where the NFT game is not only just dependent on the protocol, but it's also dependent on the website that hosts these NFTs. And so whatever exchange kind of captures that market. And I think OpenSea for the most part is centralized. So it's interesting to see if that will kind of change going forward. Will a Uniswap of NFTs appear in the near future, or will Uniswap just kind of guzzle everything in like it has already?
Yeah, I'll pass it to Naomi, but yeah, you're right. It's a bit like the Coinbase of NFTs, right? It's this centralized intermediary in this big market, and also the biz dev aspect, as you mentioned, right? Anyone from Shawn Mendes, our favorite celebrity, Shawn Mendes,
Our favorite
and
Canadian
others.
celebrity.
Oh, sorry, excuse me, Jen. Our favorite Canadian celebrity, rip to Justin Bieber.
Undercutting his worldwide appeal.
Anyway, so they have biz dev relationships with various brands. And they do these exclusives that activate a more mainstream audience. So maybe investors are hype about that as well. But Naomi, I'll toss it down to you.
Yeah, it's just interesting. They're expanding out to different blockchains as well. They're going to networks like Flow and Tezos in addition to Ethereum. They have previously just been an Ethereum-based platform. And I just want to go back to something that Adam Levine said on a previous show that stuck with me because I thought it was such a brilliant analogy, where he's like, NFTs, when they first started out, it's kind of like this key. And we figured out how to paint the key. So that's kind of cool. But like, what can the key do? And it's interesting that now they're starting to explore that. They're saying that rather than just being one-off art sales, the co-founder and CEO Devin Finzer said, the art is still getting really cool, but gaming, event ticketing, domain names, these sort of use cases are starting to expand as well. So that's really where I'm most interested, keeping an eye on as well. I think it's more interesting than just the how do we paint the key, which is cool, but I want to see how these transferable tokens can be used. But Zack, I'll throw back to you.
That is a really great image that Adam painted for us the other day. And I just wanted to say the data point in there that, June was a record month in terms of revenues for this platform is quite striking, right? You would expect that to have happened in February or March. And yet here we are in June hitting, I think, 160 million in sales. So, OpenSea takes a cut of that and is probably raking in a little bit of dough there. Ben, last thought before we change gears.
Oh, sure. Just briefly, I wanted to point out too, I think that the people that were first in this space are really the ones that are still continuing. There's still so many NFT platforms and pitches being sent out and try to develop, but I think they've kind of missed the potential wave in terms of where VC funding is going. I also think it's worth pointing out how centralized these marketplaces actually are. I think the really big ones are quite centralized. I know that Nifty Gateway, for example, they had a thing where users' accounts got hacked and NFTs got stolen, but they were actually able to reverse those transactions. And then similarly with OpenSea, they had a zero-day exploit, I believe, being sold as an NFT on that platform, and they just took that thing down. So there is a lot of sort of centralization occurring here. So always something to keep in mind when we're thinking about these platforms, but it's telling that these are also the ones that are starting to rake in that money. But Jen, I'll toss to you.
Okay, so sticking with NFTs, we're going off to Georgia. The Eastern European country is putting some of its wine on the blockchain, letting investors and wine enthusiasts track provenance and buy and sell associated NFTs. So my first question is who asked for this? I'm not sure. I don't know that. Will, did you ask for this?
Will.
No, there's a long and storied history of people trying to put wine on the blockchain. I think
just alcohol premise.
Yeah, I don't understand why everyone's obsessed with it. I think VeChain was one project that the entire premise of it was let's put all the food on the chain. And I mean, it hasn't done well. And so it's not this is a pretty old story that just keeps coming around no matter what. I don't quite understand why. To a degree, it makes sense to have some sort of system for tracking where food is going in a very globalized world. So I understand that. But at the same time, I can lie about something I put on the blockchain. That's very easy. That's the premise of a blockchain is digital assets. It's not real world assets. And that's where things get lost. That's all I have to say.
So thanks, Will. Quickly before we go off to Naomi, my understanding of the story is this is for wine collectors. So similar to physical art, there would be an NFT associated with the wine that you're collecting so that you could prove authenticity and ownership of this wine you've invested in. But Naomi, off to you.
Yeah, so this, you're right, Will. This supply chain narrative has been pervasive in the NFT world and blockchain world for a really long time. This idea of quality assurance is very interesting. I like the idea because when you put information on the blockchain, it's there forever, it's immutable, you can't have a centralized party manipulate it. But there's that huge gaping hole of how do you verify that the information that's originally put on the blockchain was correct to begin with. So I don't see how it helps with the quality assurances. It just helps with making that record, that database, keeping it secure secure and immutable and unable to be forged or whatever. But like, I feel like we have not figured out the big hole of how do you transfer real world things to the blockchain? How do you verify that process? Because that's not something that the blockchain can help with. That's like something that's still fallible, subject to human error, etc. Well, I'll throw back to you and then to Zack.
Yeah, just one quick thought is like the demographics are off here wildly as well. Like the people who are using cryptocurrency stuff and learning about it are not people who are collecting wine currently. Maybe one day, but it just seems like there's
the wine people have
big
money.
Mismatch there. True. I mean, they
Wine
both have
people
money,
have money,
just not connected via technology yet. Maybe one day. Zach, your thoughts?
Ben beat me to it, and then I'll do my thoughts.
Okay.
I see you, Ben.
I mean, I just think that, maybe we were just talking about OpenSea, right? And how nobody really cared two years ago, and they sort of pivoted, added more NFTs, and now we're at 1.5 billion. Maybe the next bull run is when the supply chain traceability narrative really takes off. I don't know what the next pivot will be, but the past is the future. Maybe the third time's a charm. We've seen 2 cycles this, and it has not worked out at all. But Zach, down to you.
Telling you, this luxury item thing in DeFi is starting to pick up steam. There's this teeny seed round in a platform that is doing this with like Rolexes and like rare Yeezy sneakers and stuff. So once you tokenize these things, they just become like assets that you can do all sorts of crazy DeFi stuff too, right? So however you verify that this is the real thing. I know in the instance of this other platform that raised a seed round, it's like the person sends the thing, they put it in a special ultra secure vault. You are issued the token. You can financialize those shoes in a way that you had never been able to do before. So as people are starting to think about this tokenization quandary, and it may have legs next time around. And we'll just have to wait and see. We'll give it a couple of years and see if it ages like fine wine. All right, let's wrap. Thank you.
That deserved a round of applause.
Yeah, that's right.
Ladies and gentlemen, Tuesday.
Thank you. Welcome to Tuesday. Tuesday show killed it. All right, we got the Wednesday show coming up tomorrow, though. So, we might get some more zingers.
Yeah, that's the true banger.
All right. Well, thanks so much. I'm Zack Seward. We have Naomi Brockwell. We have Ben Powers. We have Jen Sanasie. We have Will Foxley. We are The Hash. Stick with us on CoinDesk TV. All About Bitcoin is on at 3 p.m. Eastern if that's your thing. And we will be back tomorrow for more discussion of the latest in crypto news. Thanks so much. I probably won't wear camo again, but it was fun. And I'll see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.